This is the Toyota RAV4, a staple in the global market for compact or mid-size SUVs. But now, there's a new contender, the Toyota Corolla Cross. It has the latest technology in terms of the hybrid system, infotainment, and safety systems. What is it? Is it better than the RAV4? And is it the one that you should buy? I'm AJ, you're watching Ultra Get Fuel, and today we're going to find out. The design of the Toyota Corolla Cross seems exactly like a hatchback which has been converted into a crossover SUV, because that's what it is. So up front you have this larger plastic bumper in the lower section just to kind of emphasize that, hey, look at me, I'm an SUV now. I do like this darkened big grille, that very angry fish face over here. The two-dimensional Toyota logo with the blue accent, again, to emphasize that this is the hybrid. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But yes, there is a little bit more ground clearance now, thanks to the 160 millimeters that you get. And overall, a pretty nice design, LED lights as well. But what do you guys think? Is it enough to sell you that this is an SUV? Put it down in the comments below. The RAV4, on the other hand, is a lot more traditional SUV in terms of its proportions. So a more flat front face, a more upright, squared hood. It's also got 190 millimeters of ground clearance, so it does stand a little bit taller as well. Similar logo and a slightly different grille, not so wide, a little bit more subtle. What do you guys prefer? Put it down in the comments. The Corolla Cross is on Toyota's GAC platform, so this means that it's about 4.46 meters long. And in this case, depending of course on the variant and the engine, this weighs roughly around 1,450 kilos. I like the design, especially from this rear three-quarter angle. I like this Corolla Cross badging here, and the shiny chrome kind of gives the roof a floating effect. I also like the punches in the sheet metal on the side, like the arrow here and the similar arrow up front. Now, this being a little bit smaller than the RAV4, you know, the 16-inch wheels work for this. I think it fills the wheel arches pretty well. Again, for the design of the SUV, you need a little bit of gap here to make it seem more off-road capable for the wheel articulation, so it works. And you do have black cladding along the wheel arches front and rear. So again, it has those bases covered. And overall, it's a lot more curvaceous than the RAV4. What do you guys think about it? The RAV4, on the other hand, is on Toyota's GAK platform, now in its 5th generation. So this is bigger and heavier than the Corolla Cross. This is about 4.6 meters long. It's also a little bit wider. In this case, weighs around 1,600 kilos. But again, this has a more traditional SUV design, I would say. So bigger 19-inch wheels filling up these wheel arches, so it has that taller stance. Again, remember the ground clearance here is more. Squared wheel arches, glossy black in this case, but still the same kind of polygonal design. And similar to the Corolla Cross, I also do like the rear three-quarter of the RAV4, especially with this punch here in this sheet metal, which adds a more angular design as compared to the Corolla's more curvaceous design. So, between the two, what is your favorite? Purely on design, put it down in the comments below. The designs at the back is significantly different. So the Corolla Cross, for example, definitely looks a lot more car-like. Horizontal tail lamps. You do have this bumper and this kind of fake skid plate, but overall it feels definitely more car-like. I do, however, like the fact that you have a regular exhaust tip on the side. The design of the RAV4 is actually a lot more intricate and a lot more interesting, I would say. You have this chrome that runs through the middle, flanking the bottom of the tail lamps. You have more indentations and more angles here at the top as well. The lower part of the bumper is a lot more simple and streamlined, and you have twin tailpipes. So again, looks a lot more athletic, even though the overhang back here is a lot more than you get on the Corolla Cross. Here we have the key fob. It's quite wide and big, but nothing too fancy, I would say. But this has the keyless entry, so you can put it in your pocket, approach the car, put your hand in the doorknob, and then, or the door handle, and then the door unlocks. The door opens really nice and wide. Let's have a quick check of the door closing sound as well. So let's see how that sounds. Pretty solid, no shimmies, no shakes, no rattles. So again, Toyota's build quality, definitely something that you can be sure of. The materials here are pretty soft. However, this entire door panel is a bit too monochromatic, I would say. Personally, do you like a monochromatic interior? Put it down in the comments below. But you have a nice heavy door latch, some controls, as well as the a nice door pocket down here. Shifting our attention to the seat. So this current seat option that we have here is nice because I like this fabric material, especially in cold days like this. When you sit inside and turn the seat heater on, it gets warmer much faster. It feels a lot more nice, especially in cold temperatures. Manual adjustment for the height and the recline and the sliding, but you do have an automatic control there for the lumbar support. Let's get inside. Really easy thanks to that slightly higher ground clearance, this tall body. So getting inside is really nice. The seat is fairly wide, or should I say it's medium, it's sufficient. It's not narrow, but it's not too wide. So I would say for somebody of my build, it doesn't feel too narrow. The visibility is pretty good. Right, so let's take a look at the steering wheel. Really nice. You also have a heating option for the steering wheel, which I am loving today because it's super cold outside. Controls for the menu on the screen here, which we'll talk about in a minute because you have a digital instrument cluster. You also have telephony and audio controls. On the right-hand side, you can operate your driving assistance system. So you also have, for example, the lane keep assist over here and the lane centering, the adaptive cruise control, the speed limiter, all of that control is over here. No paddle shifters to speak of course, because remember we spoke about that ECVT system. There's no stepping as well. So at this point in time, there are no paddle shifters. So one of the main talking points is, of course, we have a new digital instrument cluster here, which looks really nice. And especially if you change between the driving modes, you get this lovely animation. See, now we're in power, now we're in eco. So I do like this. It looks a lot more modern. And if you know anything about Toyotas, you know that they are not the quickest to innovate. So definitely this feels new gen compared to some of the other Toyotas, including the RAV4, which you'll see in a minute. The screen itself is a little bit customizable, so you can choose the different information that you would like to have on either side. New touchscreen system with new tech. It looks and feels very slick, very nice compared to other systems, and of course systems within Toyota of the past. Yeah, I would say that's pretty quick to react. So on the whole, it's a nice system. I don't really like the fact that you don't have a nice home screen where you get different tiles all together. I was fiddling around with the system for a while. You just have to either pick the navigation or you have to pick, for example, your telephone or audio. So you don't really have a nice home view with different tiles. Put it down in the comments below if I'm missing something, but you also get to see a nice energy flow meter or energy flow animation here. So you can see that, oh, am I driving the wheels with the electric motor or the engine, and what's the status of the battery? It's pretty fun to see. And if you pay attention to this for a little bit of time, you'll realize how many times it changes. It's continuously varying. It's a pretty cool system. Down here, you do see that there are only a couple buttons. There are no knobs for the volume control, but at least you have buttons, so it's easy to see or easy to feel these at night. You don't have to take your eyes off the road. There's also a lot of great buttons down here for the climate control. You get 2 zones up here in the front, and then you have knobs for that and buttons. It's a really nice system. And more buttons down here as well. So fantastic combination of touch and physical buttons. For here you see the steering wheel heating and the seat heating buttons, a USB charger, and down here you have an inductive charger as well. While this is monochromatic, the materials are pretty nice and soft touch. You get this glossy element here and the shiny chrome effect on the top. Pretty practical. I also like the damped glove box where you can easily fit the user manual as well as maybe a couple water bottles. Drive mode selector to shuffle between eco, normal, and power. You get the EV only mode button over there. Electronic parking brake, a couple cup holders, and a armrest with a 12-volt power socket. This armrest doesn't feel that well built though. It's a little bit rattly, but at least it feels like it's going to last a long time. Let's check the back seat. So first of all, again, the door opening is not 90 degrees. It's not a very big angle. Also, this entrance width that you have isn't too large, so fitting in a child seat back here is a little bit tight. Materials are actually not that bad. It's not as soft as the front. It does sound a little bit hollow, but at least down here you have softer material. Very monochromatic again. Let's hop inside. Getting inside is not as easy as the front, but sitting inside here, it definitely feels a little bit cramped. It's not terrible. It's not like the CHR, but of course it's not that spacious. This seat is set to my driving position. I'm 5'8" or about 1.7 meters. I have just about enough knee room. I can also slide my feet under the front, and headroom is plenty. Check this out. If you want to sit a little bit more upright and liberate a little bit more room in the back in the trunk, you can bring the seat a little bit forward. But overall, for people of my size, it works out. But what if you're a little bit taller? So we have our new Autogefühl intern. He is 1.87 meters tall, or about 6'1", and as you can see, there is no knee room. Sitting behind himself, there is no space for the knees. Headroom is definitely okay, but on the whole, this car in the back seat is not very spacious. Here's the key fob. It looks very similar to the Corolla Cross, but at least you have the RAV4 badging on the back. Also keyless entry. Let's test the door sound. Pretty solid. Not too much of a shimmy, a little bit, but on the whole, I would say it's definitely on the better side. I do like this nice bright blue cross stitching on the top. Soft materials here. You also have a lot more texture, like you have this nice chrome effect. And then even down here in this door handle on the inside, you have those grooves to give you better grip. Don't really know if you need it, but hey, it adds a little bit more character to the interior. On the inside, a little bit more monochromatic again, but the design is definitely similar to what we saw on the outside, with more angular shapes, a lot more chrome accents as well, the blue cross stitching. And down here you do have automatic controls instead of manual, so a little bit more upmarket, I would say, with more features. Getting inside is also really easy. This is even taller, and right away this feels like I'm actually sitting in an SUV, really upright. You know, I have a good view. I can see the hood till the edge. The Corolla Cross, on the other hand, the hood just slopes away very car-like. There's a really big overhang in the front. In fact, the windshield is so far ahead of you in the Corolla. Here it's very different. So the steering wheel looks very similar. Like I said, you have controls for the instrument cluster over here on the left-hand side, and you have controls for your adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, and those assistance systems on the right-hand side. Part analog, part digital, which necessarily isn't a bad thing. However, the graphics and the overall layout and design definitely feels one generation older. Of course, when you compare it to other competitors, other cars, even from German manufacturers or American manufacturers or Korean manufacturers, while I do love the buttons, the graphics are really outdated. The actual screen size itself is not too big. And if you were to go to the reverse gear, of course the camera is a bit dirty, but the graphics are really, really, really bad. So I'm a little bit disappointed. At this price point in this day and age, you need better graphics, Toyota. You need a better infotainment system. This car also has the optional JBL sound system, which sounds pretty good. So on the whole, things work. It's just they're not very finessed. Like these knobs here, they wiggle. You know, these switches as well, they make a very hollow sounding click noise. I'm sure they will last a long time, but the overall quality and fit and finish just seems a lot more rudimentary and rugged versus sophisticated and finessed. But anyway, large rotary dials here, or knobs rather, for your climate control systems, again with rubber grips on the outside. And the seat heaters are here for the controls for the seat heaters. The steering wheel control for the heating is on the left hand side. You have an inductive charger with a 12-volt power socket, a USB port as well. You see that you actually have a screen and a camera for the rear view. Of course, this is just a two-dimensional screen, so it's not stereoscopic and therefore will not give you the same feeling as just looking in the mirror behind you to see the cars there. But on dark nights, this really helps, because not only is it cutting out the glare from the headlights behind you, but also it really increases the contrast and you can see cars much better. So drive mode selector, electric parking brake. You also have the EV mode button, gear selector here, a couple beverage holders with nice spring-loaded sides as well, a armrest with a cubby hole with more USB sockets, a nice little tray, but again, if you give it the shake test, I would say that's a bit of a fail. Let's put that back there and forget we saw that. So the entry into the rear seat of the RAV4 is definitely wider than the Corolla Cross. So putting in your child seats is definitely much easier because you have such a larger opening thanks to this longer wheelbase. Getting inside is also quite easy. The bench is a bit low, so you actually have to make sure you don't plop down. But plenty of knee room, a lot more than the Corolla Cross. Also a lot more generous space to slide my feet underneath. Plenty of headroom as well, and right now the back seat is quite reclined, but I can also bring this up a couple notches, and now it's a little bit more upright. Definitely would love the panoramic roof, and I would suggest that. Similar to the Corolla, you have rear air conditioning vents, and similarly also a couple USB ports down there as well. And same story here with the ISOFIX points. You have two on the outside only. Armrest, cup holders. So here we can see that when a 6-foot person is sitting in the co-passenger seat or the co-driver seat, another 6-foot person is sitting behind that person, we have just about enough knee room. Headroom is also sufficient, but this bench design, similar to the Corolla Cross, means that there's not so much of under-thigh support, but definitely much more comfortable here. All right, take a look inside. So here we have 433 liters of trunk volume, which actually doesn't sound like a lot, but it's somehow usable. So again, for this size, I think this is very respectable. You do have some cubby holes on the side. It's a very wide open area, so you can fit larger suitcases. Down here, you don't have much space again, but you just have some of your tire sealant, your compressor, and things like that. You can, of course, put the seats down to get more space like this. And as you can see, this is a 40-60 split. All right, let's look inside the RAV4. An automatic tailgate, but it's quite slow. But inside, you get 580 liters of boot space. So this is significantly more than the volume of the trunk in the Corolla Cross. The loading lip is very flat and it doesn't dip further down. So it's kind of a straight loading area. It's a very wide loading area, which means you just bring up your suitcase. You can load it in sideways. You don't have to lift it back out of the trunk. And these seats as well fall in a 60-40 fashion. And here they are flat. So definitely more practical than the Corolla Cross. Both of these SUVs come with Toyota's fantastic hybrid system. So let's talk a little bit more about that, starting with the Corolla Cross, because this comes with the latest generation of the hybrid tech. You get the option here in Germany of the 1.8 or the 2-liter 4-cylinder petrol engine like the one you see here. This has a high voltage battery. Actually, the new hybrid systems have a lithium-ion battery and not a nickel metal hydride. But a really interesting system because this engine can run on its Atkins cycle, which means you need a CVT. And this does have a CVT, but not a conventional conical pulley and belt style CVT, but instead an eCVT. Now, the way this works is the flywheel is connected to the Planet Carrier, and there is one motor generator which is connected to the Sun gear. So that's called MG1. And the relative difference in the speed between the Planet Carrier or the engine and the MG1 is able to derive a different output speed of the ring gear, and therefore you get a continuously variable transmission. Ingenious. There's a second motor generator, MG2, which is the direct electric drive, but both of them turn the same output gear that goes to the front wheel. So you don't have a heavy transmission, you just have that eCVT and an electric motor, and then of course the MG1. And this combined system in this case makes 197 horsepower. As you see, this is a transverse mounted engine, so it's front wheel drive. Both of these are monocoque, so they're not ladder frame SUVs. You do get all-wheel drive for both of them, but it's an intelligent all-wheel drive, so it's an electric motor at the rear. So fantastic system. The RAV4 has the same system. It's a little bit older gen, and this is a bigger engine at 2.5 liters, 4-cylinder petrol, and the combined output of this hybrid system is 218 horsepower. So now we are in the Corolla Cross. Let's start off with this. Going through this little town, so a nice way to test the suspension at low speed on bumpy streets. And I can tell you, I've driven on cobblestones earlier today, and I've had this car for a few days, and it's actually quite comfortable. So you wouldn't feel jarring, you wouldn't feel tossed around too much. We're going over a couple speed bumps, so if I were not to slow down so much, you can tell that the damping is also very, very mature. So the suspension is actually a very nice system for the city. The turning circle, while it's pretty good and quite maneuverable, like I said, there's such a huge overhang in the front. The front windshield is so far ahead of me. I feel like I'm sitting so far back inside the car. So you have to get used to this. There's anything particular to the Corolla Cross. It's just how this platform and the design of the wheelbase and the overhang in the front just kind of makes it feel like this. The steering is really lightweight, like this, to make quick corrections here, to go through these narrow little streets inside Europe. Being a hybrid, as often as possible, the system runs fully electric, and you have this nice graphic like I showed you, where you can see the time when the car is running purely on electric mode. You can also turn on the EV mode. So for example, certain city centers might allow electric cars inside without congestion charge, and that way you can use the EV mode to drive inside these city centers. But otherwise, yeah, in the city, with the size of the Corolla Cross, since it's definitely smaller compared to the RAV4, it's a lot more maneuverable. The reversing camera is so much better in the Corolla Cross than the RAV4. So again, parking it inside these narrow little parallel parking spots on the side of the street, definitely a breeze. Now we're getting out of this little town, so let's go into power mode and see how it behaves around corners. Like already I can show you around that roundabout, body control is really well managed. So in power mode, I'm going to turn left and I'm going to put my foot down. Now, this being an eCVT, you do get that rubber band effect. So while you don't have the conical pulleys and the belt, and instead we talked about the planetary gear set and motor generator 1, which combines this whole system as a eCVT, you still have that rubber band effect. So I have the engine and it's droning. You can hear that drone. It stays in a singular RPM. So you don't really have, a more stepped transmission like you're used to in conventional transmission systems. But that being said, you do have a lot more power and a lot more get up and go in the eCVT, because again, there's the electric power, electric motor boost. So like a regular petrol CVT where you put your foot down and then, you're not, it's a lot of noise and you're not really moving forward as much. Here, because of the electric torque, like if I were to slow down a little bit and put my foot down, there's a lot more surge that you can perceive as compared to a pure CVT. So in that way it works. But the other issue is, and I can demonstrate that as we take this right turn up ahead, this is an open differential front wheel drive, and the electric torque, while it's great to accelerate in a straight line, if you were to put your foot down mid-corner, the torque comes in too abruptly, and then the front wheels, the driven wheels, lose traction, and you get wheel slip. So right now, if I put my foot down, there is a little bit of wheel slip there. And the traction control doesn't jump in quick enough to alleviate that. So ultimately, you have a little bit of tire slip. But the steering is actually very communicative. It's very direct. There's barely any slack at all. It tells you exactly what you're doing. And the body control is really well managed. Again, it just points and it dives and it tucks in. So I'm actually surprised how well this handles itself and how nice the steering is. It's not a performance, sporty personality for the steering, but it's really well sorted, I would say. All right, so country driving, city driving, pretty good overall, not really sporty, right? We can conclude that much. But how does it fare on the open road out on the highway? Let's find out. On the on-ramp, put my foot down. Again, ECVT drone. Turning in to the on-ramp is quite easy. Not too bad. Now let's go into the standard normal mode. Join the traffic, and now let's test out the lane keeping assist system. So I've set the speed to 120. The traffic sign recognition system works pretty well to pick up the speed limits signs. However, here in Germany, when you enter a town, you just get this orange square, rectangular rather, sign which tells you that you're entering a town, and then the speed limit is implied that it's 50. I've found that most often this system does not recognize that. So if you're coming from 100 and into the city, it doesn't realize that, hey, you've entered a city and now it's 50. It still thinks it's 100. So you have to be on top of it, because sometimes the system doesn't catch that. But on the highway, when you have a standard highway cruising speed, this is not really an issue. The lane keep assist also includes lane centering. So if I were to try to go to the side, you see how the system corrects for itself and keeps you in the middle. You have a nice clear view of when the system works. You can also set the distance you want it to maintain with the car in front. And overall, the system is a nice safety blanket, especially on long drives when there's fatigue and you might lose that little bit of focus, or your kids are making a noise in the back and you want to turn around and tell them to be quiet. Well, you don't have to worry about if you're going to stay in line or you're going to hit the car in front, because this car has got it taken care of. So, very nice system. Again, the Corolla Cross is the first Toyota, here in Germany at least, which gets this current next-gen tech of these systems. These systems are there in the existing cars, and we'll see that in the RAV4, but they have been now improved, and this is the first car to get that improvement. Wind noise is perceptible at speed, now at 130 kilometers an hour. I can hear the wind noise. It's not terrible, and again, when you're playing music, that drones out some of the wind noise. And at a constant steady state speed like this, you don't really hear that engine drone at all. So engine noise is okay. The tire noise is also really well contained. It's just a little bit of wind noise, but on the whole, very refined, I would say. The seats are also fairly comfortable, quite supportive. They're not really wide, so if you are a heavy-set person, let's say, these seats might be a little bit tight for you, so I would recommend you test it out. But again, you have a lot of adjustability in the height. Even the steering column can be adjusted for reach and rake. So finding a comfortable seating position is really not an issue. And the highway is quite smooth, but the suspension here as well at high speed gives you very good confidence. It doesn't rock up and down or bob up and down if there's small undulations. It's a really well-mannered car out on the highway. So we've been driving around for a while now, and even off camera, I've been driving this car for at least a day, and I've been getting an average of about 5.4 liters for 100 kilometers overall, which I would say is actually really good, considering that it's not just highway, but at 50% also within the city limits. So this hybrid system really has a lot of benefit when you're driving around in the city, because it's giving pretty good mileage. 5.4, I think, is a really good number for something like this. So yeah, the Corolla Cross. What do you guys think? Put it down in the comments below. But now let's hop into the RAV4 and see how that compares. All right, now in the RAV4, going through the town yet again. So how does this compare? So instantly, I feel like I'm sitting in an SUV. So the Corolla Cross, yes, you can put your seat up higher and etc., but you still feel like you're sitting in a car. The minute you're here in the RAV4, instantly, this is clearly an SUV. So one of the main things that kind of helps that is just the visibility. So like I was saying, there's such a large front overhang in the Corolla Cross, and the windshield is so far ahead in front of you. Whereas here, it's not that case. The windshield is much closer to you, And because of that, it doesn't rake so steeply. So the top of the windshield is closer to the top of my line of sight. So I feel like I can see further up easier. And in this way, in the city, when I'm at traffic lights, I can easily see if it's turning green or if it's turning red, etc. much more easier. And because the hood is flatter and it's a lot more squared and large, or rather, squared and taller, I can see the edges a lot more clearly, which helps my overview of the car. That being said, it is wider and longer than the Corolla Cross, so it is a little bit more cumbersome in the city, and that isn't really helped at all by the really poor quality of the reversing camera. You can turn on the 360-degree view with a button here, which helps. The 360 view definitely helps, especially when you want to park, but I think they need to upgrade the cameras. That's probably the biggest issue that I find with driving the RAV4 in the city. Similarly, with the hybrid system, it's continuously shuffling power. In fact, I tried to count how many times in a minute it shuffled between the engine and the battery and the regen, and I just lost my mind. It's way too many times. But again, electric drive in the city just makes it cleaner, makes it quieter. You're not disturbing the people who live nearby, and it just feels much more calm. So you have that benefit for driving in the city here as well. The steering is also very similar. In fact, overall, I'm quite surprised how similar I feel the RAV4 to be compared to the Corolla Cross in terms of its driving dynamics. Even though this is significantly heavier and quite a bit bigger. Steering is very light and manageable in the city, so again, making quick corrections here and there. The steering rack is definitely slower than the Corolla Cross, as expected, but it's not too slow, and therefore this still affords you good maneuverability. Heated steering, of course, for a cold day like this. Loving it. Now we are making our way onto the highway, so let us also check the assistance systems. So this still gets the similar lane centering, radar cruise control system, and the traffic sign recognition. The traffic sign recognition, like I mentioned, even here, if anything, it's even more rare that it catches the city limit sign, and you have to kind of be aware of that, especially when I like to use the speed limiter when I'm in the city, so you need to be really on top of that. But it does recognize the systems, and you can quickly jump to the speed limit set if you're in the limiter by just holding up or down. But let's go to the radar cruise. Let us turn it on, and you can set the distance that you want it to maintain with the car in front, but it still has the same kind of eCVT. So that also means that if you put your foot down on the highway, it is going to have that rubber band effect, and we can test that out. It's not as bad, but it's still the same kind of rubber band effect. This 2.5 sounds a little bit deeper, has a deeper tone, but it's still not something that I would say sounds sonorous in a nice way. Doesn't sound sporty. Even though it has those dual exhaust tips, it's not necessarily something that's going to really excite you. So it depends. Like, you know, for somebody like me, I don't mind because I know how the system works, and I'm really happy to know how great this eCVT system is, and I don't mind the sound. But I know a lot of people who would just be annoyed by that constant drone when they put their foot down. And if you're somebody who loves a sporty sounding engine, then you're not going to be satisfied with that. So it's something that you should test on a long test drive on the highway and see how you feel and see if it's something that you can live with. But what you can definitely live with is the assistance systems. Like I said, it works, you know, about as well as the system in the Corolla Cross. Even though this is slightly previous gen, it's not outdated tech. Lane centering is definitely very, very good. It keeps you in the middle. In fact, the Corolla Cross, that system is even more next level, in the sense that if it notices that there's somebody pulling in to the lane next to you and they're coming close to the edge, it will give you a wider berth within your lane, so it's a little bit more intelligent that way, whereas this is just going to look at the two lanes next to you, the two lines, and then kind of keep you in the middle, even if there's a big truck which is just at the edge or even crossing over. So this is where that next gen system is a little bit better than this current gen system. But yeah, overall this is a little bit quieter at speed than the Corolla Cross. The wind noise is definitely a little bit lesser. The engine drone is also a little bit lesser. And the steering feels quite heavy, so you get that nice confidence. And because it's a slower rack, it's a lot more grown up in how it responds to your steering inputs. So definitely something that gives you confidence on long drives. The seats are a little bit wider here in the RAV4 than the Corolla Cross. So again, if you are somebody who is generously proportioned, then you might find these seats a little bit better and a little bit more comfortable. Again, lots of adjustment possibilities for lumbar support, the angle of the base, angle of recline, obviously, etc., etc. The visibility also is nice in this corner, similar to the Corolla Cross. You have that, you have a gap between the outside rear view mirror and the A-pillar, so you have enough space to peer through into these corners. So between the two, again, they ride very similar. You know, the insulation of sound is also very similar. The suspension here as well seems very solid, seems very mature, doesn't get upset easily by undulations on the highway. So very surprising how similar these two vehicles are to drive, even though they're on different platforms and are pretty different in terms of size. The Corolla Cross starts at around 40,000 euros here in Germany, but this particular version that we have is around 45,000 euros. The RAV4, on the other hand, starts at around 45,000 euros, and this particular version is around 52,000 euros. But in the US, you get even lower trims, and then a high-spec Toyota Corolla Cross will be very similar to a Toyota RAV4. So, which one is the right one for you? Well, let's talk a little bit about what's good and what's bad about each of them. The Corolla Cross definitely has the better technology. That infotainment and the digital instruments, plus the advanced driver assistance systems, are definitely much better than the RAV4. The biggest issue, however, is the rear seat space. It's quite cramped, and even putting a child seat is not the easiest. The RAV4, on the other hand, for that same price or similar price, gives you so much more practicality. There's so much space in the back seat, so much more space in the trunk. But the biggest issue here is the technology is really archaic. So ultimately, it comes down to you. Do you need the extra space, or do you not need the extra space? If you don't, and you have a second car, a bigger car for the whole family, then the Toyota Corolla Cross is a much better pick because the compact dimensions make it easier in the city even more, plus you have the better tech. And because it's a next-gen hybrid system, it's better in terms of efficiency as well as emissions, and overall a much more future-proof product. However, on the other hand, if you have just a singular car in your garage, then the RAV4 is a jack of all, which does more for about the same price. So put it down in the comments below what you guys are looking for. If you're in the market for one of these two, tell me what's important to you. Let's have a conversation. And thanks for watching. Subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you guys next time.